Yeah, I've done a lot of thinking about a theology of land, working with churches these last many number of years. Churches often are posing a couple of questions. One question being, who owns the land? And the other question being, what is the value of the land that we have? And those questions are often answered fairly logically. The first question being, well, who owns the land? Well, we do as churches, and therefore we get to do what we want. And the other question is, what is the value of the land? We usually tend to answer that question from a value perspective as it relates to money. The challenge about those answers when we think about it from a theological perspective is that both of them could be viewed quite differently. When we think about who owns the land, well, when we go to the scriptures, we discover that the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. Right? So ultimately, God is the owner of the land, and we're stewards of land for the brief period of time that we get to inhabit. And the value of land from the church's perspective is, how can we use this land to best love God, and how can we use this land to best love and serve our neighbor? Yeah, so there's a few churches around our district that are right now exploring, how can they better utilize their land for the care of their neighbor. One of those churches is Peace Portal. They're thinking about an affordable housing project.
Like many churches, we were wrestling with how are we engaging our neighbors, our community. And so we began what we soon called a community audit. As our city cries out, as needs present themselves, I do think that's the way God speaks to us, the church, and we get to respond to those things.
Another church is Westwood in Coquitlam. They're thinking about how can we serve seniors with housing.
We did a feasibility study with Andy and came up with kind of an architectural rendering of what we could do on our piece of property.
And the other church is Tent Church downtown. Tent's site has recently been redesignated to allow for 20-story towers. And so they're thinking to themselves, how might we redevelop our site that would incorporate residential tower and likely within that social housing. Why do we have hospitals throughout our country? And a big part of why we have hospitals in our country is because at one point in time, the church saw that there was a critical need. In Canada, we have this critical need for housing. We're significantly undersupplied. And the church has this unprecedented capacity right now to respond to that.
I think is valuable and necessary for every church to ask these questions that we're asking. Who are we? What are the assets? Would we be able to engage our city and meet some of the felt needs with affordable housing?
As an alliance, we've always been about that missionally.
Where who we are and the needs of our community meet, that's where God's asking us to step in, move into proximity with those in need. That's where God's inviting you to respond. How you'll do that, I think, is unique for each church, but to go and listen and to engage in those conversations, I think is really important.
Take the time and the energy to begin to investigate and explore. And I think when you begin down that journey, you're going to discover that the Lord's going to open doors and begin to spark energy and spark imagination.
1 Samuel 14:6, Jonathan said to the young arm bearer, "Come, let's go over to the outpost and see what God will do. Perhaps He will give us a victory." All we can do is put everything that we have on the table. And then when we do that, I believe the Lord acts and performs amazingly, more so than we can ask or even dream of.
Just make sure the conversation continues, that we continue to ask the hard questions, discern together, and really wrestle to the ground, what is God asking of us? And once we know that, then to walk in obedience and do it.